Hello. Good afternoon. Good morning to some.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. I know some of you already. Hi. Hi, Mark. Hi, Sylvan. Hi. Hello, Nicola. Hi, Luca. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you all. We'll just kick off in a few minutes. I'm Ollie. I'm leading the webinar, which is either a good or bad thing. We'll find out. Hi, Annika. Nice to meet you. I'm Ollie. We'll just wait till 3 minutes past, and we'll crack on. We'll make this quite an interactive session, I hope.
Sounds good.
Fantastic. Right. Thank you. It's 3 minutes past. Let's try to fit a lot into a very short time. As people come on, maybe Lewis, you can make sure people get invited in so I can get started. Hi, Sam. Thanks for joining. Great. Thank you all for coming. I'm Ollie. I'm one of the founders at Count. I've been roped into doing this webinar, which I love doing this kind of thing. So I'm really pleased to be here with you. I know some of you already. I know some of your customers. I know some of your users. Some of you may know nothing about Count. Just to set expectations, my hope was to go through a relative introduction to Count, focusing on kind of the problem that we see with people in working with product analysts, working in product teams, talking a bit through the workflow, a bit of introduction to the canvas in general, and then just talking through use cases that we keep seeing with our customer base, which could be helpful for you. I'll make sure I leave. So it's going to be a relatively designed to be an introductory session, which some of you may already know, but if so, then feel free to ask questions or feel free to leave if this is not covering the right content. But I'll make sure we have a decent amount of time at the end to answer any questions people have in particular. If you want to just dump that into the chat in Google Meet, it's the bottom right corner. There's the little chat icon, second from the right of those list of icons. That's where to ask questions. And that's it. Looking forward to it. Let's begin. So just want to set the scene really about like why what Count is and the problem that we're trying to solve for. I guess in many ways it's true for what we're solving for is a problem which is true both in product analytics as much as it is in any kind of domain of analytics really, which is that within the kind of the last few years, a lot of teams have adopted the modern data stack, as it were, which is this kind of idea of a SQL cloud-based infrastructure for doing data analytics and data modeling. A number of you might have these kind of warehouse and ETL tools. But what our thesis is that actually a lot of this value and investment that's been made in businesses over the last 5-10 years or more is really constrained and bottlenecked by the way that the front of the stack works. And the primary reason here is that actually the way that the business intelligence, the like last mile, as you would call it, of the stack works, it actually hasn't changed at all in about 20 years. A lot of the paradigms that people are using, look at Tableau, Power BI, have been around for a lot longer than the infrastructure that we're now adopting. These were all kind of on-prem native solutions before the cloud became true. And this is now the bottleneck, which really limits the ROI and limits the ability for the business to engage with the data in a faster, more agile way. And a way that we talk about this internally, and that this may be triggering for you, is the idea that to see the pain, you just sort of think about the way that you're working with your product teams, your product managers, to get them data, to help them understand what's going on, to help them understand and reach a conclusion. That workflow is often incredibly painful. It usually involves multiple tools. It involves a lot of rework as people try to understand and clarify and gain conviction with an analyst to help understand what's going on. So it may involve writing queries in a SQL IDE, maybe putting things into a spreadsheet, maybe building some BI tool. But ultimately, that feedback loop is very painful. And really, this comes down to the fact that a lot of the data BI tools that we have, be they generic BI tools or even product analytics specific BI tools like Amplitude or Mixpanel, they are designed for operational decision making rather than sort of strategic decision making. Put simply, they are designed to give access to a number and answer simple questions. They're not designed for helping a product team to go through their full product development cycle with hypothesis testing, measurement, and exploration, which involves multiple stakeholders and involves a natural degree of iteration. So that is a problem which is true in other domains of analytics, but it's particularly true in the kind of agile, fast working way that within product, where product teams are by nature very collaborative, very agile focused, and therefore the pain of this is even more acute than it is perhaps in other domains. To simplify the problem, or put it another way, one of the big pains of this is that the tools that the product teams are using to make decisions, their process for defining a problem, gathering evidence, evaluating, and then making a decision, this process is often built in a tool which is not data-led, maybe Miro or Figma or Google Sheets or something which is collaborative by nature. And the data team, the data product analysts, are working in a tool which is very much designed solely for query generation, for chart building, very task-orientated process. Building a chart, it's querying, it's analyzing, visualizing, and maybe presenting it in a dashboard. And these two worlds are very separate. In fact, the presentation layer of a traditional BI tool or product analytics tool actually acts, in our view, as a wall between these two worlds working. What you want is a position where the product analytics team and the product team are working synonymously, where there's a kind of overlap in those two worlds. And that's really what's been the driving force behind us building Count, which you may have already gathered by looking at our website, is effectively an infinite collaborative canvas built for analytics and for storytelling. So that is to give you the sense of the context setting for the problem that we are seeing in the market, more macro, the pain points you may be experiencing when it comes to a fractured workflow and trying to reach conclusions where you've got to basically set up a workflow where the software you're using is very separate. There's a wall between the two different creation processes in the business. So the way that we would describe Count is as a combination of a whiteboarding tool, a SQL editor, a BI tool, and a Jupyter notebook in one, to create this one collaborative canvas, literally, where a product analytics team and a product team can work together, where their worlds are overlapping, where there's an ability to agilely work through analytics, through the qualitative side of the product development cycle, tracking data, building insights, building models, and building reports in a way which actually leads to people working far more efficiently and far more trust between the two worlds. That's a quick overview. Let me explain more how the product works. So you may have noticed that we're in this kind of canvas board here. Down here is a menu which you may be familiar with if you're working in product a lot. It's a kind of the collaborative whiteboard tools. We have here sticky notes. We have objects you can add in. You can build process flow diagrams, for example. We can even take screenshots of a part of your website, or in this case, a bit of our own product UI here, and inject it into the product, just like you're using a collaborative whiteboard. This is, in many ways, kind of core to imagine how a lot of your product teams are working. But this is this what the key of account is that alongside this kind of what we would call qualitative information, this kind of business context setting, clarification of the problem, the scoping work that goes, which these tools are really good for. We've built a paradigm of cells where if you've used things like Jupyter Notebooks before or in a SQL IDE, the idea is you have your queries, your visuals, your Python logic sitting in a cell, which in itself is an object you can place in this canvas, but it's running on a database or it's building off a CSV file. And it's the combination of these two paradigms, the data world, and which obviously is probably more the space of a product analyst, and the product management world, the product world where they're working this kind of very rich evidence-based, qualitative evidence-based world. The combination of these two in a fully agile, collaborative environment is really where the magic of Count sits. To clarify how cells work in a bit more detail, this is obviously a SQL query. It's running on BigQuery. You can connect Count to any cloud data warehouse or any cloud database that you have in the cloud. But you can write not just SQL, you can also write Python. So you can have a Python cell here. You can build visuals directly off as well within the canvas as well, like a BI tool. You could build a bar chart, for example. I can just map columns directly to different axes here. And as you can see, the big win here is that you're able to take a result from a previous cell and then reuse it again in another cell. And this lineage, this mapping out of ideas, you can even go back to SQL, for example, here. If I wanted to do that, let's do a select star from that visual. And it's this chain of logic which allows you to very quickly prototype and lay out your methodology as you're getting to a metric. And we'll come on back to that in a bit more detail. But these are the building blocks of the product. It's this collaborative space where you're able to work with qualitative and quantitative data together, which really gives greater efficiency, faster agile workflow, and gives more transparency to where the data is coming from, what the data is telling you, which really makes Count work really well. What I want to spend a bit of time on now is just because, is to give you a flavor of the kind of use cases that this really enables for product analytics, particularly. This will just be to give you a flavor of, like, these are obviously the building blocks, but it's helpful to see the kind of how this materializes into some outputs you can really get your teeth into. So I'm just going to scroll down here to some of these there's 5 different use cases. I'm going to whistle through them, but just for sake of time. But then obviously we can explore more detail with questions, or we can obviously send you some materials to help you explore it more yourselves. The first one I want to start with is actually my favorite, is the onboarding funnel. Now, this is kind of a very, very, very common, very regularly used kind of use case just in product generally, mapping out a user journey, showing the path a user takes through a UI. In this case, this is a kind of the onboarding journey for a mobile app where someone's logging in for the first time. You can see in here that this is branching. They're branching between different routes, but between if they're a new user or an existing user. But the idea of this, as you can already see, is it's not just mapping out the stages here to give clarity to the user journey for everyone. Alongside that, we then have the metrics, the activity numbers, and the conversion metrics, which actually are driving that step. And the numbers for these metrics, you can find out where there's numbers from by clicking on a visual, and it will take you down to the queries that have been written by the data product analyst to give that conversion and explain it. And it's this kind of level. There's 26 metrics in this flow, right? And this isn't even a very complicated example. This is a kind of simplified version of what our customers are building. This kind of level of visibility of like what the bottlenecks are, where the conversions are, making it really self-explanatory. You can't build this in a dashboarding tool. You can't build this in a stacked bar chart, in a kind of funnel analysis tool, in a product analytics platform. This clarity that you're bringing is really important. And the other big efficiency win here is the fact that often we're seeing in our customers, the product manager is building the funnel and the analyst is working side by side, building out the metrics alongside them. So the process of building to this output is also as important for gaining clarity on metrics, definitions of metrics, clarifying the scope of the work. It's that kind of agile building out of this output, not just the end result, which is really informative to building that culture of data-led decision making. Additionally, you've got filters in here as well. So you're able to then have filters which drive cuts of the data as you're going as well. Before I move on to other examples, let me just also explain something quite important. If you're trying to present this as a dashboarding environment or trying to make this a report that gets looked at regularly, you don't have to just work in a canvas. These white objects here are called frames, and that means you can turn this into a report, into a presentation output, which can be seen and pushed into Slack or email on a regular basis. This is often how roughly 1 in 5 of the canvases that are made are looked at this way in our customer base. Because what's interesting, you may be interested to hear, is that actually for most use cases, seeing the methodology, not just the end result, really helps for those kind of interim, quick, exploratory pieces of work that most product teams are doing on a kind of as they do project work and look at new features. Hopefully that's a good introduction to sort of how the workflow fits and how the kind of output, the flexible outputs you can build within Count. It's certainly a different kind of way to present numbers, but one which, as you can see, is very clarifying. Just to the other end of the spectrum, to the complexity. This is actually one of my, again, another very favorite example of how you can use Count. This is actually just a screenshot of, I think, one of our last iteration of our website. But in here, what we're doing is just using this as a way to clarify events, and producing documentation and some degree of data on click-through rates for different events in our website. So using this as a clarification board to discuss events, to discuss conversion rates, to discuss activities and events, be it in marketing, not just in product. This could be any screenshot of your UI, could be any feature that you're looking for, and obviously could still be using filters to help explain it. But it's the kind of the power of communication of this, and that really helps to make these numbers far more believable, far more understandable, to help make better decisions. Another example, again, a hugely common one for us, for not just for in product, but actually just generally across different parts of an organization and a business, particularly a software business, is a metric tree. The ability to sort of have, as most product teams do, a kind of North Star metric, and then working with the business to define and then display the levers that drive that metric as a hierarchical plot to help drill down to see the trends that are driving overall performance. This kind of presentation, again, as a grid of numbers of being intelligible, but here you can define them as a hierarchy and give context and explain the product, explain the metrics really clearly. A common example of this, which takes another, I haven't got an example of it here, but just to tease you with it, is what we call a dashboarding tree, which is where you actually have a metric, we then have a link to another canvas to give breakdown of profit by different sectors, which the user can click on. And as you almost have the top level metric as a trend line, and then you can embed another canvas into the canvas as well. So for example, I'm just giving you an example. Here's another canvas which you can literally just embed as a thing to click on to go to a detail below on that metric. So it gives you high level metrics with a drill down capability to look at this metric in more detail by different cuts. And again, the power of the canvas, at least if you wanted to look at it this way, is that you're able to build and define the definitions of these metrics directly within the canvas as well, and get buy-in and definitional, buy into the definitions, buy into the data, underline the metrics with the business. That all the code that you're writing as a product management team is not just invisible, stuck in a data warehouse. It can be seen, can be discussed with the team. The final example I wanted to show you is because some organizations are very PowerPoint presentation led in telling stories. Here we have another example of an output you can build, which is just literally slide decks. And these slide decks can be, you can see here, linked to metrics and live data within the canvas with Python cells, SQL cells, and letting you produce dashboards and presentation slides which are actually with live data in it to tell the story. We have a whole list of different templates that you can use within the product to define and build out presentations. So you can literally drag a template in like this. You can take a visual you want to plot, like this one here, and I can just fit it into that template and then give it a title. and then you've suddenly got yourself a presentable presentation right within your canvas, which you can output as a PDF or just share a link directly to in the report mode or as in the Canvas as well. This is only a sort of a half an hour overview, and I therefore want to make sure we have time for questions. I'm sure you have any particular questions to ask. If you do, but I've hoped I've given you a bit of an overview of the kind of the problem that we're seeing at a kind of a high level, why we see the world of a product analyst and a world of a product manager very separate, very non-agile in the way they work. The work for that might entail, and sort of the bigger macro issue with data stacks in general, and then try to introduce it to the canvas as a way to sort of meld those two worlds together. And then the various kind of examples to just whet your appetite for the kind of ways it can change the way you present numbers and work and build out to some data assets and data products, doing that in a collaborative way with metric trees, kind of event tracking and process flow diagrams and user journeys. I'll leave it there. I'm probably bored of my voice by now, which is understandable. I'd love to answer any questions you have in the last sort of 8 minutes or so. If there are no questions, I will not bore you with my voice anymore. But what I will point to is we think we'll send you all this recording. Yeah, as why we're recording it, and also just send you some more documentation, some more of these examples that you can play with, use within the free version of Count as well, if you want to have it more of an explore of it. Otherwise, short and sweet. Thank you, Sarah. Go on, Mark. How are you?
Whoops, I accidentally hit that. I don't have a question, but there was a time I used this for something really boring with a really small company that was non-technical. I was cleaning up their accounts receivable. And so I used Count, and I had I think 4 or 5 different sources of data and then their QuickBooks. And I did it for myself, laid it all out so I could get the answer. But then I used that on a call with them. And I figured usually that kind of data stuff goes over their head because they're totally non-technical. But they liked it so much that the next time I got on a call with them, they wanted to bring up the canvas just to look at it, but it made the conversation go so much easier, talking about how I went through the process of reconciling everything. And I was pretty impressed that non-technical people were all over it.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that example. I completely agree. It's when you think about what it takes to get to someone's conviction in a story that you're telling them, the data you're presenting, showing them the methodology of how you got there is as important almost in the end result. And I think being able to do that in a palatable way is one of the secrets of the canvas. That's really good to hear that. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
4 out of 5 canvases that our clients are using are never actually seen in this mode, because they actually, as they get adopted, they actually find that the stakeholders in the business want to see the methodology, the working that got to the output as well. That's great. Thanks for sharing that, Mark. I'm pleased it's working. One thing I want to say, I know that a number of you here, Sarah, for example, Sam, are actually already customers. So I'm going to take this feedback as that we need to do more deeper dives into the product for more best practice. Not just do this is meant to be more of an introductory session, but for people who are already existing users, we're going to start set up a bit of a platform for best practice as well. Because I think that we need to go a bit more detail, a bit more into the detail for our customer base too, on a bit more of the kind of guts of this. So we'll take that as a next step. That will make sure there's more of that kind of best practice going on, as well as just some introductions to the concept of the canvas and the use cases. But I hope it's still valuable.
One question I have, have you looked at how big of a lift it is to do the same thing for data form that you did for DBT?
We haven't actually yet, no. I get that. I think it's because data form is still quite a small fraction of the market.
Probably, yeah. But
we haven't looked at it yet.
If you use the Google stack, like BigQuery, Looker, all that kind of stuff, it's part of the picture. So it probably will get as big as whoever is using that stack, I would guess.
That's good to hear. Yes,
and I've used it twice now. Now I'm pretty familiar with it. It's not quite as polished as DBT, but it's not too bad. It's not hard to live with. It's okay. It's pretty good.
I'll tell Guillaume, who was the founder of Dataform. He lives in London. I'll tell him. Yeah. Thank you. That's helpful to hear that that'd be useful.
Yeah. It works pretty good with that stack.
Thank you. Well, look, thank you all for attending. I hope that has been useful. And we will follow up with more materials later. Any other questions? I think most of you will know where I am. I'm Ollie at count.co is the email address you can use. Or just reach out on Intercom if there's anything more specific we can answer. Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Have a good rest of the day.
You too.